Die, Cammy you. Nash Chi's fingers clamped around my neck like iron pincers, his wedding ring digging painfully into my throat. My wedding dress swept over the scattered rose petals as I desperately clawed at his arms, leaving bloody streaks on his skin. Why? I widened my eyes, staring at the man who had kissed me tenderly just 10 minutes ago. Nori is back. A sickly fervor gleamed in Nash Chi's eyes. Only if you disappear can we be together openly. Oxygen was slowly being squeezed out of me, and I heard the ominous creak of my neck bones under unbearable pressure. Don't worry, I'll give you the most splendid funeral. This is the last sentence I heard in this world. Ah! I screamed and bolted upright in bed, my throat burning with pain. The phone displayed April 18, 2023. 3 months before the wedding, hanging above the bed was a photo of me and Nash Chi, his arm around my waist, his smile so tender it could melt. I rushed into the bathroom, retching, splashing cold water on my face. When I looked up, the person in the mirror was deathly pale. There were no bruises on my neck, but the pain of being strangled was so real it made me sick. I've been reborn. I gripped the edge of the sink tightly, my nails scraping against the tiles with a screeching sound. Memories of past lives flashed through my mind like a kaleidoscope. When Nash Chi was pursuing me, he brought me a different breakfast every day. The sight of him waiting all night outside my office building while I worked overtime. On the night he proposed, he knelt on the pedestrian overpass at Nanjing West Road, with electronic candles lighting up the entire street behind him. Cammy, you are the only light in my life, now that I think about it. He wasn't looking at me at all. He was looking at Nori Cheng standing behind me, holding up her phone, that unattainable white moonlight he's been in love with since high school. I pulled out my tablet and searched for Nori Cheng Los Angeles. Sure enough, her recent Instagram post popped up, a bikini photo with the caption "Getting ready to return home for career development." This was exactly when she came back in the previous life. Upon receiving the news, Nash Chi deleted all his social media accounts overnight. Back then, I naively thought he was just under too much work pressure. Ding! A WeChat message from Nash Chi pops up. Baby, are you awake? I bought you Xiao Yang's pan-fried buns. In my past life, I would have been moved by such small gestures for ages. Now, it just makes me sick, I replied, coming right away. While changing clothes, I stared at the wedding dress design sketches in the wardrobe, feeling nauseous. This Vera Wang mermaid gown cost 320,000, and Nash Chi didn't even blink when he ordered it. Because it's worth it, he said at the time, kissing my fingers. Now I understand. He was paying for the sensation of strangling me. In the living room, Nash Chi was arranging takeout boxes. The light grey turtleneck sweater accentuated his sharp features, with gold-rimmed glasses perched on his high-nose bridge. How many people have been fooled by this elite appearance? Eat it while it's hot. He handed me the chopsticks, the wristwatch on his arm being the birthday gift I gave him last week for his 30th. I bit through the skin of the pan-fried bun, not letting go even when the scalding broth burned the tip of my tongue. The pain kept me awake. Are we meeting the wedding planner today? Nash Chi wiped the grease from the corner of my mouth. I stared at his hands with their distinct knuckles. These very hands would strangle me to death 3 months later. The dates changed. I pushed the lunchbox away, suddenly feel like watching a movie. Nash Chi visibly froze for a moment. In a past life today, he used meeting a client as an excuse. But in reality, he went to Pudong Airport to pick up Nori Cheng. Shall I go with you? His gaze drifted toward his phone. No need, you go ahead with your work. I bought tickets for the re-release of Titanic right in front of him. We watched this movie on our first date. And he cried so much he soaked half my shoulder. Looking back now, maybe he was crying because he couldn't say the "you jump, I jump" vow to Nori Cheng. Nash Chi indeed breathed a sigh of relief. Then I'll come find you after reviewing the proposal. Before heading out, I made sure to spritz on Nori Cheng's favorite Bluebell perfume. In the bottom shelf of Nash Chi's bookcase from her past life, there was half a bottle she had left unused. I took a taxi straight to Pudong Airport. The international arrivals exit was crowded, and I spotted Nori Cheng at first glance. She was even thinner than in her Instagram photos, her camel-colored Max Mara coat hanging loosely on her, like a leaf that could be blown away by the wind at any moment. No wonder Nash Chi couldn't forget it. This sense of brokenness can't be acted. I adjusted my expression and bumped into her. Sorry, I steadied the staggering girl as her belongings scattered across the floor. Nori Cheng's jade pendant slipped out from her collarbone as she bent over. It was clearly a matching pair with the one Nash Chi wore around his neck. It's okay, she said, her voice as light as a feather. I picked up her compact for her. You're Nori Cheng, right? I've seen your performance in Gazelle. Her eyes suddenly lit up. You know me, of course, the youngest soloist in the National Ballet of China. I deliberately misstated her credentials. You've got the wrong person. She shook her head, but the tips of her ears turned pink. I seized the moment. Want to share a ride? My car is almost here. On the way, I learned that her rented apartment wasn't ready yet. How about staying at my place first? I warmly invited her. My fiancé is often away on business, and I get scared living alone. After declining twice, Nori Cheng agreed. Little did she know, I had already returned the apartment Nash Chi gave me and moved into a newly purchased riverside luxury flat last month. The moment the fingerprint lock recognized her, Nori Cheng let out a wow. This view is amazing. I poured her a glass of lemon water. If you like it, stay a few more days. Holding the glass, she stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her slender silhouette almost translucent against the light. No wonder Nash Chi called her a crystal that needs protection. Too bad all crystals are man-made. I took a photo of her back and sent it to Nash Chi. Ran into a high school classmate who's staying over for a few days. You don't mind, right? He replied instantly. As long as you're happy. 3 minutes later, Nori Cheng's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frantically declined the call. Telemarketer, she said with a smile. Though her fingertips were trembling, I pretended not to see the character Jin on her locked screen. How about hot pot for dinner? I flipped through the food delivery app. There's an authentic Chongqing old stove nearby. Nori Cheng suddenly covered her mouth and rushed to the bathroom. The sound of retching came through the door. I stood in front of the mirror reapplying lipstick, watching the corners of my mouth curl higher and higher. Morning sickness is much more straightforward than a revenge plan. At dinner, Nori Cheng only drank half a bowl of porridge. My stomach trouble is acting up again, she explained. I served her a piece of steamed perch. Shall I accompany you to the hospital tomorrow for a checkup? No need, she nearly dropped her chopsticks. It's just an old issue. I nodded and didn't press further. In our past life, when she was hemorrhaging from a miscarriage, Nash Chi was tearing up my photos in our wedding room. In the middle of the night, I was startled awake by a faint noise. Nori Cheng was on the balcony making a phone call, the moonlight casting a silver edge around her. She's really kind. Her voice trembled with tears. Nash Chi, we can't keep. I walked over barefoot, the glass door reflecting my twisted smile. Nori. I tapped on the window. Can't sleep. Her phone slipped from her hand in fright. I bent down to pick it up. The screen was still lit. At the top of the WeChat chat was a voice message from Nash Chi, with our wedding photo as the background. Shall I warm you some milk? I handed the phone back to her. She shook her head, tears falling onto the screen. Would you like some honey? I asked softly. It helps with relaxation. Nori Cheng suddenly grabbed my wrist. Miss you. Actually Your hands are so cold. I held her hand in return. Is it your period? She opened her mouth but ultimately said nothing. I watched her finish the milk and tucked the blanket snugly around her. Good night, she suddenly said as I turned off the light. Your fiancé must love you very much. I stood smiling in the darkness. Yes. Loved me so much he wanted to kill me. Of course, I didn't say that out loud. The next day, I coincidentally took Nori Cheng to the cafe downstairs from Nash Chi's company building. I'll go buy cake. You find us a seat. I left my bag on the chair. When I returned, Nori Cheng's seat was empty. In my Gucci bag, the backup phone was recording. On the screen, Nash Chi pinned Nori Cheng against the fire escape and kissed her. Her resisting hands eventually wrapped around his neck. 3 months. Nash Chi's voice was hoarse. Just endure 3 more months. I turned off the video and bought an iced Americano, spilling it on my skirt. Nori, I rushed into the restroom in a panic. Can you help me see if this stain can be washed out? Her lips were swollen, and there were fresh hickeys on her collarbone. I'll go buy you a new dress. She fled in panic. I turned on the faucet, and cold water rushed over the Cartier watch on my wrist. This was the 3-year anniversary gift Nash Chi gave me when we were in love. The back of the watch face is engraved with my eternal love. Now eternity has expired. That evening, Nashchi came home uncharacteristically early. Baby, he hugged me from behind. Do you want to have our wedding in Bali? In my past life, it was in Bali that he strangled me to death. Why the sudden change of location? I turned to look at him. His eyes flickered uncertainly. Thought you'd prefer the seaside. I touched his flushed earlobe, but I've already booked a venue on the Bund. Cancel it. His tone suddenly turned firm. I'll pay double the fee. I tilted my head to look at him. You said you liked that hotel just last week. Nashchi suddenly pinned me down on the sofa. Be good. His breath brushed against my face. Do it for me. I stared at his Adam's apple, so close within reach. In my previous life, just before I died, I used my last bit of strength to claw 3 bloody marks there. Sure, I replied with a sweet smile. I'll do whatever you say. He kissed my forehead in relief, unaware that my hand, hidden behind me, was gripping a fruit knife with deadly force. The knife tip poked small holes into the pillow one after another, like the bullet holes that would appear on his body in the future. I stood in the walk-in closet, my fingers gliding over rows of dresses. In the end, I chose a strapless dress in bright red. In my past life, Nashchi had said he hated seeing me in red the most. It looks like blood, he said with a frown at the time. Now I make him see blood every day. Cami, Nashchi knocked on the door outside. Nori wants to invite us to dinner. I applied Dior $9.99, my lips red as if I've just sucked blood. I'm here. The restaurant was chosen by Nori Cheng, a Japanese restaurant on the Bund with a per-person cost of 3,000. In their past life, Nashchi had celebrated her birthday here. As I walked in arm with Nashchi, Nori Cheng was fiddling with a napkin. She wore a white dress today, as pure as a jasmine flower. Miss, you look so beautiful today. Her gaze shifted between me and Nashchi. I deliberately leaned closer to Nashchi. He picked the dress. Nashchi's Adam's apple bobbed. The waiter brought the appetizer, Nori Cheng's favorite bluefin tuna belly. Try this, I said, placing a slice of sashimi covered in wasabi onto Nashchi's plate. In his past life, he was allergic to seafood. Nashchi stared at the piece of fish, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Don't you like it? I asked, tilting my head. He forced himself to swallow, his Adam's apple bobbing as if he were gulping down razor blades. Nori Cheng suddenly stood up. I'm going to the restroom. After she left, Nashchi downed half a glass of ice water. When did you start eating raw food? I wiped the corner of his mouth with a tissue. He grabbed my wrist. Cami, can we what? I leaned closer to him, the scent of my perfume drifting straight into his nose. Nashchi's eyes began to lose focus. Can we get married early? I smiled and withdrew my hand. Sure, how about next month? Nori Cheng came back with red-rimmed eyes. I pretended not to see the foundation smudged on her collar. Hey Nori, could you take a photo for us? I handed her my phone. In the frame, I had my arm around Nashchi's neck, my lips brushing against the curve of his ear. Nori Cheng's hands were shaking so much she couldn't focus the shot. You two look good together, as she returned the phone to me. Her nails scraped against the tempered glass screen with a sharp, grating sound. I rushed to swipe my card at checkout. Consider it a celebration for my promotion, I said, showing the email just sent by HR. Nashchi stared at the words Vice President, his pupils contracting sharply. In my past life, I gave up this opportunity for him. Congratulations. His voice was flat and dry. Nori Cheng suddenly bent over, retching. What's wrong? I patted her back gently. She waved her hands in panic. Stomachache. I took out my phone. I know a great gastroenterologist. No need, she almost screamed. I'll just go back and lie down. Nashchi stood nearby, his face paler than a corpse. I smiled. Then how about going to the pharmacy to get some medicine? Nori Cheng fled in panic. On the way home, Nashchi was unusually silent. While waiting at a red light, I reached out to touch his thigh. What are you trembling for? He slammed on the accelerator. The next day, I took a day off and brought Nori Cheng to Ruijin Hospital. I told you it's unnecessary. She huddled in the corner of the taxi. I handed her a bottle of mineral water. Stomach issues shouldn't be ignored. I directly chose the obstetrics and gynecology department when registering. Nori Cheng's legs went so weak when she saw the sign that she couldn't walk. Did we register at the wrong department? I held her arm and said, you've been vomiting so badly. What if you're pregnant? Her whole body began to tremble. I don't have a boyfriend. In the consultation room, The elderly doctor adjusted his glasses. When was your last period? Nori Cheng's nails dug into her palms. Last month. Postponed for 2 weeks, the doctor scribbled on the medical record. Go get a blood test first. Nori Cheng fainted at the sight of the needle during the blood draw, collapsing in the chair and unable to get up. I put my arm around her shoulders. Don't be scared, it'll be over soon. The moment the needle pierced her vein, her tears fell onto the back of my hand. Miss you. Her voice was as faint as a mosquito's hum. You're too kind to me. I gently stroked her long hair. It's only right. The lab results would take 2 hours. I took her to the cafe and ordered a cup of hot milk. Warm your stomach. I pushed it over. Nori Cheng held the cup and suddenly asked, if you found out Nash Chi was cheating, I would kill him. I smiled. Her cup fell to the ground. Shards of glass scattered everywhere. Milk splashed onto her white dress. Like a stain of semen, I bent down to clean up. The broken glass cutting my finger. A drop of blood fell onto Nori Cheng's shoe. Ah, it's dirty, I said, pulling out a wet wipe. She stared at the streak of blood and suddenly began to retch. My phone rang at just the right moment. Hello, honey. I put it on speaker. Nash Chi's voice came through. It's the company anniversary dinner tonight. Are you coming? On this day in his previous life, he had an affair with Nori Cheng in the storage room. Of course. I looked at Nori Cheng's pale face. Shall I bring Nori along? There was a 3-second silence on the other end of the phone. As you wish. After hanging up, Nori Cheng suddenly grabbed my wrist. I don't feel well. Then it's even more reason to go. I wiped the stain from the corner of her mouth. The company has a medical room. The evening anniversary celebration was filled with clinking glasses and lively chatter. Arm in arm with Nash Chi, I toasted each guest in turn. The diamond ring on my left hand dazzling to the eye. Director Jin and his wife are truly a perfect match. A talented man and a beautiful woman. The young girl from the marketing department flattered. I smiled and took a sip of champagne. Nori Cheng hid in the corner, her glass of lemonade untouched. Go say hello. I nudged Nash Chi. He looked like a death row convict being marched to the execution ground, standing at a distance. I watched as Nori Cheng tilted her head and said something to him. Nash Chi suddenly shoved her away, sending the wine glass crashing to the floor. The entire room fell silent. I quickly walked over. What's wrong? Nori Cheng was in tears. I said the wrong thing. Nash Chi's veins bulged at his temples. She's had too much to drink. I helped Nori Cheng up. Do you want to go to the lounge? She suddenly broke free from me and rushed to the bathroom. When I followed her in, she was leaning over the toilet, vomiting violently. Here. I handed her a tissue. She looked up at me. Her makeup smeared like a watercolor painting drenched in rain. The test results, she said hoarsely, are out. I pulled the paper from my bag. The HCG value was clearly marked with a plus. Congratulations. I smiled. Nori Cheng slumped to the ground. It's not his. I never said it was Nash Chi's. I squatted down to meet her eye level. Her pupils shrank to the size of pinpoints. I opened my phone gallery and pulled up the kissing video from the fire escape. Nori Cheng's scream attracted the cleaning lady. It's nothing. I slipped the auntie 200 yuan. My friend just went through a breakup. When I returned to the venue, Nash Chi was looking for me. Where's Nori? His voice was tense. I shook my phone. She said she had something urgent and left first. Nash Chi visibly relaxed. By the way, I leaned closer to his ear. I also have some good news. He froze. What? I'm pregnant, I said softly. Nash Chi's expression looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Oh really? I pulled out another test result from my bag. He stared at the words Camu and positive above. His hands trembling like a Parkinson's patient. We're going to be parents, I said, stroking his cheek. Nash Chi suddenly hugged me. The force so strong it made my ribs ache. I love you, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I leaned against his shoulder, watching our wedding photos scroll across the big screen. I love you too, I said with a smile. Then, right in front of him, I tore the test results into tiny pieces. The scraps fell to the ground like snowflakes. Nash Chi's expression froze. Just kidding, I patted his shoulder. It's just gastroenteritis. The corner of his mouth twitched, as if he wanted to smile but couldn't. I stood on tiptoe to kiss the corner of his lips. Disappointed. How could this be? He shook his head mechanically. The music suddenly switched to Marry Me Today. Shall we dance? I extended my hand. Nashchi followed me into the dance floor like a puppet on strings. Hold me tighter, I whispered into his ear. His palms were drenched in cold sweat. As I spun him around in a dance, I caught a glimpse of Nori Cheng standing at the doorway. She clutched a lab report in her hand, her face drained of all color. I raised my glass to her. The champagne shimmered like molten gold under the light. 3 days later, Nori Cheng moved out. My family is urging me to return to my hometown, she said, standing at the door with her suitcase. I handed her a paper bag. For the road, inside were prenatal vitamins and miscarriage-preventing medicine. She didn't take it, the suitcase wheels rolling over my toes. Oh, by the way, she suddenly said as she turned. Back in high school, a girl jumped off a building for Nashchi. I smile, I know, that girl was Nori Cheng's best friend. She never knew, even until her death, that it was Nori Cheng who showed her depression diary to Nashchi. You knew all along, Nori Cheng's voice cracked. I pressed the elevator button for her. That's why I said I would kill him, as the elevator doors closed. She finally broke down in tears. I hummed a tune on my way home, where Nashchi was packing his luggage. Business trip. I leaned against the doorframe. He didn't even look up. There's a problem with the Shenzhen branch. What a coincidence. I showed my plane ticket. I'm going there too. A corner of a blue velvet box peeked out from Nashchi's suitcase. In his past life, it was in Shenzhen that he bought the engagement ring for Nori Cheng. What are you going to do? His voice was tense. Meeting a client. I nudged his suitcase with my foot. Coming along, on the plane. Nashchi was restless, feeling unwell. I handed him motion sickness pills. He swallowed 2 pills and quickly fell into a deep sleep. I gently pulled the phone from his pocket. When unlocking it with his fingerprint, his ring finger twitched slightly. The pinned contact on WeChat was Nori, heart. The latest update is, she insisted on coming along. We'll get the ring tomorrow. I took a photo of the chat history and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Shenzhen was hit by heavy rain, and the taxi was stuck on the elevated highway. Nashchi kept checking his watch. Are you in a hurry? I asked. He shook his head. Raindrops trickling from his hair onto his suit. I reached out to wipe the water from his face. You look terrible. Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist. Cammy, if I've done something wrong, will you change? I looked straight into his eyes. He nodded, his eyes reddening. That's good. I leaned against his shoulder. Raindrops on the car window distorted the city lights, like melting rainbows. When the hotel front desk said only king-size beds were available, Nashchi visibly panicked. Should we try another place? He pulled out his phone. I stopped him. Let's stay here. The room was well heated, yet I was shivering with cold. When Nashchi came out of the shower, I was watching Gone Girl *. Why are you watching this? He paused while drying his hair. I hit pause. Learning how to deal with a cheating husband. His towel fell to the floor. I was awakened by sobbing in the middle of the night. Nashchi was on the phone on the balcony. No, she's getting suspicious. His voice was barely above a whisper. I walked over barefoot and slid open the glass door. Had a nightmare. I hugged him from behind. Nashchi was so startled that he dropped his phone into the pool. Sleep now. I kissed his back. He was as stiff as a corpse. The next day, I coincidentally had a lunch appointment with a client right next to the jewelry store. Wait for me 10 minutes, I said to Nashchi. I need to pick up a document. He looked as if he had been granted a pardon and rushed straight into the jewelry store. Through the window, I watched him kneel on one knee, trying a ring on Nori Cheng. There was still a piece of medical tape on the ring finger of her left hand from the foredrip. After taking the photo, I sent Nashchi a WeChat message. The client changed the location. I'm heading to the hospital. 3 minutes later, he rushed into the obstetrics and gynecology department at HKU Hospital. I was sitting on a bench outside the abortion surgery room, eating ice cream. Cammy, Nashchi's face turned deathly pale. I licked the cream off the corner of my mouth, here to accompany Nori for the follow-up. He froze completely. A nurse pushed the door open at just the right moment. Family of Nori Cheng. Nashchi reflexively raised her hand. Incomplete medical abortion. Requires uterine curettage. The nurse handed over the surgical consent form. Sign here. I stood up. I'll sign it. I'm her sister. Nashchi looked at me as if I were a monster. What's the matter? I tilted my head. Didn't you say he was her cousin? When the surgical lights turned on, Nashchi slumped into the plastic chair. I know everything about you too. I opened the medical record, including the child. He buried his head in his hands, his bloodshot eyes peeking through his fingers. Why? His voice was hoarse. Why didn't you expose it? I closed the medical record. Because it was fun. Nashchi raised his head, looking at me as if meeting me for the first time. Since when have you? From the night you strangled me. I smiled. His expression went blank. The nurse pushed open the door. The patient is hemorrhaging badly and needs a blood transfusion. I rolled up my sleeve. Take mine. Nashchi grabbed me abruptly. Are you crazy? Isn't type O blood universal? I shook him off. After drawing 400 cubic centimeters, my vision went dark. Nashchi steadied me, his palm icy cold. Is it worth it? His voice trembled. I stared at the dark red liquid in the blood transfusion bag. Of course it's worth it. After all, this blood will be the death of Nori Cheng. In her previous life, she got infected after surgery because she was transfused with Rh-negative blood. This time, my type O blood contains high concentrations of antibiotics, enough to rot her uterus through. When Nori Cheng was wheeled out, her face was as pale as paper. Child, she weakly reached to touch her belly. I held her fingers. You can conceive again once you recover. She looked at Nashchi, tears streaming from her temples into her hairline. Nashchi stared at me. You planned this all along. Planned what? I feigned innocence. He abruptly pulled me out of the hospital room and pinned me against the wall. What exactly are you trying to do? I leaned close to his ear. I want to see you choke me again. Nashchi let go as if burned. Madman. I straightened the collar he had wrinkled. Are we still having the wedding? His pupils suddenly constricted. The invitations have all been sent out. I patted his cheek. Remember to be there on time. On the flight back to Shanghai, Nashchi kept his eyes closed the entire time, pretending to sleep. I opened a shopping website and ordered the exact same wedding dress as in my previous life, and the booking confirmation for that cliffside hotel in Bali. When the flight attendant brought the drinks, I specifically asked for tomato juice. Want a taste? I held the cup to Nashchi's lips. He opened his eyes, saw the red liquid, and abruptly knocked the cup over. I'm sorry. The flight attendant hurriedly wiped it off. I licked the juice off the back of my hand. What a shame. Like blood. But not blood, but there will be real blood soon. The sunlight in Bali is like molten gold. I stand before the floor-to-ceiling window of the cliffside hotel, gazing at the same sea horizon as in my past life. Darling, all the guests have arrived. Nashchi embraces me from behind, the wedding ring pressing against my waist. I turned around to straighten his tie for him, catching a faint whiff of aftershave from him, the same one he wore on the day of his arrest in our past life. Nervous, I felt his palm was drenched in sweat. He shook his head, but his gaze drifted toward the end of the hallway. Nori Cheng checked into the suite next door last night. I'll go check on the cake, I said, kissing his cheek, in the banquet hall. The three-tiered wedding cake was adorned with fresh roses. I took out a small vial of potion and dripped it into the filling layer on the top tier, colorless and odorless, yet potent enough to paralyze the muscles of the consumer within half an hour. In my past life, Nashchi used it to knock me out. Miss you, the photographer called to me. Shall we do a test shot? I stepped in front of the backdrop, the white tulle skirt sweeping over the scattered petals on the floor. Perfect. The photographer looked through the viewfinder. Mr. Jin is truly blessed. I smiled. He would soon find out just how deadly that blessing was. Back in the dressing room, I opened the safe. Inside is the death certificate of Nori Cheng's mother, 20 years ago. There was an explosion at the chemical plant, and Nashchi's father was the factory director, and Nori Cheng's mother was the only quality inspector who died in the incident. What are you looking at? Nashchi suddenly pushed the door open and came in. I quickly closed the folder. Prenuptial agreement. His eyes flickered. We don't need this between us. We do. I pulled open the drawer. Sign it. The agreement stated that if the divorce was due to infidelity, Nashchi would leave with nothing. He stared at the terms, the pen leaving ink blots on the paper. Don't trust me. His voice was tight. I reached out to smooth his furrowed brow. Just a formality. He finally signed, his handwriting as crooked as an earthworm. I'll go greet the guests. He fled as if escaping. I retrieved another document from the secret compartment of the dressing table. Nashchi didn't know that carbon paper had been slipped into the agreement just now. Every name he signed was duplicated onto the stock transfer agreement. The phone vibrated with a text from Nori Cheng. "Can we meet?" I replied. "The bride and groom shouldn't see each other before the wedding. Why don't you take him for a walk by the beach?" After sending this, I poured the prepared sleeping pills into Nori Cheng's lemon water. Half an hour later, the waiter reported, "That young lady has fallen asleep." I changed into casual clothes and sneaked into Nori Cheng's room. She slept like a corpse, with a photo of her and Nash Chi on the nightstand. I opened her suitcase and found that bottle of bluebell perfume. After mixing in the aphrodisiac I had prepared earlier, I sprayed some on the pillow, enough to intoxicate anyone who catches its scent. Finally, I tucked the copy of the death certificate into her handbag. "Good night," I whispered, closing the door. On the eve of the wedding, a sudden downpour arrived. I knocked on Nash Chi's door. He was drinking whiskey. "Can't sleep." I sat on his lap. His whole body stiffened. "We have to. Tomorrow." "I know." I untied my robe, revealing the bruises on my neck. Nash Chi suddenly stood up. "What's going on?" "Nori came to me today." I hesitated. "She said she wants to die with the child." The wine glass shattered in his hand. "She's insane." I straightened my collar. "Don't blame her. Women are sensitive after a miscarriage." Nash Chi paced back and forth in the room like a caged beast. "I'll go find her." "Don't." I stopped him. "Let me handle this." He stared at me for a long time before suddenly asking, "Why are you so nice to me?" "Because I love you," I replied with the most sincere smile. The sound of the heavy rain hitting the windows was like drumbeats. I leaned into Nash Chi's embrace, listening to his gradually steady breathing. On the last night of my previous life, he held me like this as we fell asleep. At that time, I thought it was happiness. Now I know. It was the executioner gathering strength. The sunlight on the wedding day stung my eyes. I sit in front of the dressing mirror, watching the hairstylist recreate the updo from my past life. "Miss Yu has such a beautiful neck," she says as she fastens the diamond necklace around it, "like a swan's." I smile. "Soon, this swan will be strangled to death." "Where is Mr. Jin?" the makeup artist asked. I glanced at my phone's location tracker. The red dot was blinking in Nori Cheng's room. "Probably preparing a surprise," I said. The wedding march began right on schedule. I walked arm in arm with my father down the aisle, the train of my white gown sweeping over the red carpet. Guests held up their phones, the sound of shutters clicking one after another. Nash Chi stood before the pastor, impeccably dressed in a suit, his face deathly pale. Nori Cheng sat in the front row, her eyes swollen like peaches. "You may now kiss the bride." Nash Chi's lips were cold, carrying the bitterness of whiskey. When cutting the cake, I deliberately gave the top layer to him and Nori Cheng. "Eat more." I personally handed it to them. Nori Cheng's fork had just touched the cream when she suddenly gagged. "Feeling unwell?" I asked with concern. She shook her head but suddenly collapsed into Nash Chi's arms. "Nori," Nash Chi panicked. The guests began to stir. "Maybe it's heat stroke." I directed the waiter. "Take her to the lounge." Nash Chi wanted to follow, but I grabbed his sleeve. "The ceremony isn't over yet." His eyes showed hesitation, but in the end, he stayed. For the toast, I deliberately chose Nori Cheng's favorite rosé champagne. "Drink one for her." I handed it to Nash Chi. He tilted his head back and gulped it down, his Adam's apple bobbing as if swallowing razor blades. After 3 rounds of drinks, I excused myself to touch up my makeup and left the banquet hall. In the lounge, Nori Cheng was vomiting. "Are you okay?" I handed her a towel. She looked up, her makeup smeared like a melting wax figure. "You knew all along. What do you know?" I unscrewed the cap of the mineral water bottle and handed it to her. She didn't take it. Instead, she pulled out the death certificate from her handbag. "Is this real?" I nodded. "The chemical plant explosion wasn't an accident. Nash Chi's father tampered with it to commit insurance fraud." Nori Cheng's pupils contracted violently. "He got close to you to keep an eye on you," I whispered. "Afraid you'd uncover the truth." She began to tremble, her nails digging dents into the leather sofa. "Impossible. Check your mother's diary." I patted her shoulder. "It's in the iron box in the attic back home." Nori Cheng suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," I leaned closer to her ear, "I was also deceived by him for 10 years. A sudden scream came from the banquet hall. "It's starting." I quickly walked out. Nash Chi was smashing the cake, with cream splattering everywhere. The drug was taking effect. "Honey," I feigned panic as I supported him. His gaze was unfocused, a strange smile hanging at the corner of his mouth. Nori, where's Nori? I pointed to the lounge. She said she wasn't feeling well. Nashchi staggered forward, knocking over 3 tables in his rush. Guests raised their phones to chase and capture the moment. Flashes of light illuminating the scene. I leisurely followed behind. Casually turning on the live broadcast equipment, the lounge door was wide open. Nori Cheng was holding a piece of broken glass against Nashchi's neck. "Your father killed my mother," she screamed hysterically. Nashchi laughed wildly, his expression distorted by the drugs. "So what? You approached me, just for this." Nori Cheng's hand was bleeding. "Or what?" Nashchi loosened his tie. "Did you really think I loved you?" I stood at the door, making sure every word was recorded. Nori Cheng's glass shard sliced Nashchi's skin, beads of blood trickling down his collarbone. "I had an abortion for you." "That's because you're cheap." Nashchi suddenly grabbed her by the throat. "Just like your mother." Nori Cheng's scream was cut off in her throat. This scene was all too familiar. Nashchi's gesture, angle, and force were exactly the same as when he strangled me in my past life. The only difference was, this time I was holding up my phone to record. "Stop it." I rushed forward to break up the fight. While secretly tripping Nashchi, he fell on top of Nori Cheng, his hand still gripping her neck. Camera flashes went off like crazy. "Murder!" screamed one of the guests. When the security guards rushed in, Nori Cheng was already motionless. Nashchi was pinned to the ground, his face smeared with blood and cream. "Cammy," he reached out his hand to me. I took a step back and held up the equity transfer agreement. "You signed it, remember?" His pupils constricted abruptly. The police arrived quickly. Nori Cheng still had a faint pulse when she was lifted into the ambulance. Nashchi suddenly turned to look at me as he was being shoved into the police car. "Who the hell are you?" I took off the diamond necklace and threw it to him. Engraved on the back of the pendant was "To my savior," a gift Nashchi had given to his lifesaver when he was 16. His face turned deathly pale in an instant. "It's impossible. It was Nori who saved me." "Did Nori Cheng tell you that she was the one who carried you out of the fire?" I chuckled lightly. "What a coincidence. I also have burn scars on my back." Nashchi began struggling violently. "You're lying." I lifted my long hair, revealing the crescent-shaped scar behind my ear. "This wound was from when you smashed the glass, remember?" Nashchi froze as if struck by lightning. "The fire department records from that year still exist." I leaned closer to him. "Would you like to see them, Mr. Jin?" The moment the police car door closed, I heard his beast-like howl. Reporters swarmed forward. "MS, may we ask why your husband attacked Miss Cheng?" I wiped away non-existent tears. "He has always had violent tendencies." "Are there rumors that Miss Cheng is the other woman?" I pulled out the kissing video on my phone. "They have known each other for a long time." That night, this interview trended on social media. Sitting in the hotel suite, I watched the online compilation of Murder in a Wealthy Family edited by netizens. Nori Cheng was diagnosed with brain damage at the hospital and may become vegetative. Nashchi faces a 20-year prison sentence for intentional homicide. Meanwhile, my live-streaming account gained 1 million followers overnight. My phone vibrated. A message from the lawyer. "The transfer of Jin Group's shares has been completed." I poured a glass of champagne and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The same ocean view, the same moonlight. The difference was, this time it was me standing here. The doorbell rang. "Room service," said the person outside the door. I opened the door, and the waiter pushed the meal cart inside. "Your steak and..." He lifted the silver cover, revealing a document folder beneath. I pulled out a check and handed it to him. "Thanks for your trouble." The file folder contains photocopies of Nori Cheng's diary. The last page reads, "Uncle Jin agreed to fund my studies abroad, on the condition that I never investigate Mom's case." I burned the diary, letting the ashes fall into a champagne glass. To revenge, I toasted the air. The next day, I went to Nori Cheng's hospital room. She lay among the machines, like a pale puppet. "I have good news for you," I said. Sitting by the bed, Nashchi has appealed. The ECG monitor's waves jumped violently. "He said you threw the first punch." I stroked her hand with the tube inserted. The judge believed it. A tear slid from the corner of her eye. "By the way," I pulled out my phone. "Let me show you something good." On the screen was Nashchi's prison interview. "Nori Cheng has been blackmailing me. he said to the camera. She's mentally ill. I turned off the video. Do you need me to hire a lawyer for you? Nori Cheng's fingers suddenly twitched. When the nurse rushed in, I was panicking and pressing the call button. She suddenly became agitated. The doctor shook his head after the examination. Perhaps she heard something upsetting. I bit my lip guiltily. It's all my fault, I mentioned Nash Chi. As we left the hospital, a light rain began to fall from the sky. I opened the black umbrella and suddenly remembered that the weather was just like this at my funeral in my past life, except that time. It was me lying in the coffin, and now it's their turn. On the flight back home, the flight attendant recognized me. My condolences. She handed me a warm towel. I thanked her and opened my laptop. The stock price of Jin Group was plummeting, while the funds under my name were soaring. Would you like a drink? The flight attendant asked. Champagne, I said, the most expensive one. When the wine arrived, I was scrolling through Nori Cheng's Instagram profile. The latest post was from the day before the wedding. After tomorrow, everything will be different. She was right. However, this difference was completely opposite to what she had imagined. When the plane landed, my legal team was already waiting at the VIP passage. 3 things, I said as I walked. First, apply for medical guardianship of Nash Chi and Nori Cheng. Second, the lead lawyer quickly followed up, acquire the scattered shares of the Jin family. I want absolute controlling ownership. And the third, I stopped in my tracks, find the families of the victims from the chemical plant incident back then. 2 weeks later, I returned to the Jin Group building as the new chairman. The security guard looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost. President Yu, good morning. I smiled. The security system needs an upgrade. The board unanimously approved my reform proposal. No one dared to oppose a widow holding 51% of the shares. After work, I ran into Nash Chi's mother in the parking garage. You poisonous woman. She lunged at me, trying to grab my hair. As the bodyguards held her back, I noticed the needle marks on her wrist. Mrs. Jin, I said softly, shall I release the evidence of your son's drug use to the media? She froze instantly, like a chicken with its neck wrung. Go retire quietly in Australia. I handed her a check. Or next time, the reporters will be filming you using drugs. Trembling, she took the check and fled in panic. I got into the car and received a call from the hospital. Miss Cheng has woken up. I turned the steering wheel. I'll be right there. Nori Cheng leaned against the headboard, half of her face stiff from nerve damage. Come, to laugh at me, she slurred. I set down the fruit basket. Here to discuss cooperation. Cooperation. I pulled up the latest video of Nash Chi in prison. Nori Cheng is the mastermind, he said to the camera. She forced me to kill my wife. Nori Cheng's ventilator alarm went off. As the nurse rushed in to adjust the settings, I leaned close to her ear and whispered, want revenge? I have proof that his father was the one who killed your mother. Her cloudy eyes suddenly focused. Why are you helping me? Because, I smiled, I also want to know the truth. Before leaving, I slipped a voice recorder under her pillow. Press this button once you've made your decision. As the elevator doors closed, I heard a heart-wrenching scream from the hospital room. How melodious. Just like the final sound I made when Nash Chi strangled my windpipe in my past life. On the day the court notified us of the hearing, Shanghai saw its first snowfall since the start of winter. I walked into the courtroom wearing a Max Mara camel-colored coat, followed by a legal team of 12. Reporters raised their cameras, the flashes blindingly bright. You, as the victim, why do you support a lenient sentence? I stopped in my tracks. Who said I was the victim? The entire room erupted in an uproar. When the bailiff led me to the plaintiff's seat, Nash Chi was already confined in the defendant's dock. 3 months had passed since we last met. And he had grown so thin that his cheekbones protruded sharply, the orange prison uniform hanging off him like a rag. When he saw me, his eyes suddenly widened, and his lips trembled as if trying to say something. I tore the victim's family forgiveness letter in half right in front of him. The judge banged the gavel. Court is now in session. The prosecutor began presenting the case, with the projector showing surveillance footage from the hotel. In the footage, Nash Chi was seen choking Nori Cheng until she stopped struggling. Defense counsel, the judge asked. Nash Chi's defense attorney stood up. My client was under the influence of drugs at the time. I let out a light chuckle. Any additions? The judge looked at me. I pressed the remote, and the screen switched to another video. Nash Chi is pouring white powder into a champagne glass. This is 2 hours before the wedding, I said. He was completely sober. Nash Chi suddenly stood up. That drug was given to me by you. The bailiff pressed down on his shoulders. Order in the court. The judge banged the gavel. I opened the folder. This is the pharmacy record of the defendant purchasing triazolam. Nash Chi's face instantly turned pale. Of course. He didn't know that I had hired someone to alter the surveillance timestamps in advance. Does the defense have any further evidence to submit? The judge asked. The defense lawyer wiped his sweat. We request to call witness Nori Cheng to the stand. The side door of the courtroom opened, and Nori Cheng was wheeled in on a wheelchair. The left side of her face was paralyzed, her mouth twisted, but her gaze was terrifyingly clear. Miss Cheng, the defense attorney asked, has the defendant been under your coercion for a long time? Nori Cheng's gaze shifted between Nash Chi and me. I gently touched the crescent-shaped scar behind my ear. She suddenly spoke up. He forced me to have an abortion, said he would kill Camille. Nash Chi looked as if struck by lightning. You bitch, it was clearly you. Order in the court. The gavel slammed down heavily. I raised my hand. Your Honor, I have new evidence to submit. The bailiff took the USB drive, and the projector flickered to life. A photo of Nash Chi from high school appeared on the screen, next to a girl in a school uniform. This is Ju Yuanyuan, who jumped to her death in 2008. I zoomed in on the photo of her diary. Before her death, she wrote, Nash Chi said if I dared to speak out, he would let the whole school know how dirty I am. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Objection. The defense attorney stood up. This is irrelevant to the case, it's related. I switched to the next photo. Nori Cheng was Ju Yuanyuan's best friend. Nash Chi began to tremble, the handcuffs clanking against the railing. Nori Cheng suddenly screamed, It was you. You were the one who posted her depression diary on the bulletin board. The bailiff had to restrain her. I continued playing the video. It was the investigative report on the explosion at Nash Chi's father's chemical plant. The 2001 accident resulted in 1 death and 12 injuries. I pointed at the screen. The deceased was Cheng Li, Nori Cheng's mother. Nori Cheng's sobbing abruptly stopped. And this, I held up a yellow document, is the handwritten approval from Director Jin ordering his subordinates to tamper with the pressure valve. Nash Chi shook his head frantically. Impossible. My dad can't write. Indeed, I smiled. So you forged his signature. The courtroom fell into dead silence. I walked up to the witness stand and took out a small box from my bag. Do you recognize this? I opened the box lid. Nash Chi's pupils constricted abruptly. Inside was a damaged school badge, its edges charred black by fire. You always thought Nori Cheng saved you from the fire. I raised the badge higher. But the one who saved you that day was actually me. Nash Chi let out a beast-like growl from his throat. Impossible. Nori has a scar on her back. Burn scars can be faked. I turned to Nori Cheng. Right. She lowered her head, her wheelchair trembling slightly. I walked up to Nash Chi and threw the school badge on the ground. The ceramic material shattered instantly. The keepsake you've treasured for 15 years. I stepped on the fragments. Belongs to Ju Yuanyuan. Nash Chi suddenly broke free from the bailiff and lunged at me. I'm going to kill you. He was pinned to the ground by 5 bailiffs, his face pressed against the cold marble floor. I crouched down and whispered in a voice only he could hear. By the way, Nori Cheng's child isn't yours. Nash Chi's eyes were bloodshot. You're lying. The DNA report is in the warden's hands. I patted his cheek. Enjoy your life sentence. When the judge announced the recess, reporters frantically clicked their shutters. I stood at the plaintiff's stand, watching Nash Chi being dragged away. The last glance he gave me was exactly the same as the look in his eyes when he strangled me in my past life. Only this time, it was him being dragged toward hell. On the day the verdict was announced, the sun came out in Shanghai. Nash Chi was sentenced to life imprisonment for intentional homicide, drug abuse, and commercial fraud. Nori Cheng was sentenced to 3 years for perjury and harboring a criminal, with a suspended execution. I was in the middle of a board meeting at Jin Group when my lawyer called. Chairman Yu, Nash Chi has filed an appeal. I glanced at the quarterly report on the projector. Reject it. He's still asking to see you. I closed the financial report page and pulled up the video feed from the prison. Nash Chi was banging his head against the wall, his forehead covered in blood. Tell him, I said into the microphone. The DNA of Nori Cheng's miscarried child has a 99.9% match with old Lee, the driver. The boardroom was dead silent. 12 men in suits sat frozen like statues. Continue with the report, I rapped on the table. The CFO's laser pointer trembled as if afflicted with Parkinson's. After the meeting, the secretary said Nori Cheng was waiting for me downstairs. I took the elevator to the lobby, where she stood by the revolving door, her left leg still in a cast. Satisfied, she asked hoarsely. I handed her a check. Your payment. Nori Cheng didn't answer. Why help me get a reduced sentence? Not helping you. I took back the check. Just keeping you alive to watch Nash Chi lose his mind. She suddenly laughed, the sound like nails on glass. You think you've won. She leaned closer. Nash Chi still has $30 million. I took over the conversation. Just got frozen by Interpol yesterday. Nori Cheng's expression froze. By the way, I pressed the car key. I'm sorry about your mother. She suddenly grabbed my wrist. What do you know? I knew her death wasn't an accident. I shook off her hand. She discovered Director Jin was manufacturing drugs. Nori Cheng collapsed to the ground as if her bones had been pulled out. Should I take you back to the hospital? I opened the car door. She shook her head and pulled out a small medicine bottle from her pocket. No need. I recognized them as potent sleeping pills, enough to make her sleep forever. Suit yourself. I closed the car door. In the rearview mirror, Nori Cheng sat on the marble floor, like a discarded ragdoll. I dialed 120. Someone has attempted suicide by taking pills at the entrance of the Four Seasons Hotel. Then I stepped on the accelerator. 3 months later, I stood on the terrace of the Rockbund Art Museum. Holding 2 newspapers in my hand, heiress daughter-in-law in vegetative state, medical bills unpaid, former Jin family heir commits suicide in prison, suspected mental breakdown, bubbles in the champagne glass rise slowly and burst silently. The phone vibrates. A message from the private detective. Original diary of Nori Cheng's mother has been found. I reply, burn it. Some truths should remain buried forever. Just like the grand funeral Nash Chi arranged for me after I was strangled to death in my past life, everyone praised him for his deep affection and loyalty. No one knew it was my corpse inside the coffin. The evening wind tousled my hair as I took off my diamond earrings and threw them into the Huangpu River. These earrings were the first gift Nash Chi gave me. Now, like their owner, they lie forever in the darkness. I opened the safe and took out the wedding photos I had treasured in my past life. As the flames consumed the photographs, I seemed to hear Nash Chi's last words again, spoken just before he strangled me. Don't worry, I'll give you the most magnificent funeral. Now, the funeral I've prepared for him and Nori Cheng is far more splendid than the one he intended for me. At least it made the headlines. The phone vibrated again. It was a call from Ruijin Hospital, MS. The custody documents for Miss Cheng require your signature. I glanced at my watch. I'll be there in an hour. The smell of disinfectant in the hospital corridor reminded me of my past life. Nori Cheng lay in the ICU, tubes covering her body. Is she still conscious? I asked the doctor. He shook his head, but her vital signs are stable. After I signed the papers, the nurse handed me an envelope. It was found under Miss Cheng's pillow. Inside is a yellowed photograph. A young Mrs. Nori Cheng stands at the entrance of the chemical plant, with Mr. Nash Chi beside her. On the back of the photo is written, "Evidence destroyed. Keep quiet forever." I fed it into the shredder. As I stepped out of the hospital, the setting sun dyed the clouds blood red. I dialed the warden's number. Has Nash Chi's personal effects been processed yet? Just about to seek your instructions. Donate everything to the orphanage, I said. Except for that fragment of the school badge. The warden hesitated. He swallowed it. I chuckled lightly. Saves on cremation costs. Hanging up the phone. I turned on the car radio. The news was reporting that Jin Group's stock price had hit a record high. Newly appointed chairwoman Cami Yu announced $1 billion investment to build a workers' hospital. I turned off the radio and stepped on the gas. In the rearview mirror, the outline of the hospital gradually faded. Just like that Cami Yu who was strangled in a past life. Gone forever. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window on the 68th floor of the Jin Group building. Holding half a glass of whiskey in my hand, Shanghai shimmered beneath my feet like a fallen starry sky. Chairman Yu, here's the quarterly financial report. The new CFO carefully placed the documents on the table, avoiding eye contact with me. I swirled the wine glass. How much growth compared to last quarter? 37%. I turned to look at him. What was the highest record during old Jin's time? Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. 15%. I poured the wine into the trash. Starting tomorrow, all employees get a 10% raise. The CFO gaped. This isn't standard procedure. Now I am the procedure. I pressed the call button. Show him out. The office returned to silence, and I opened my tablet. The left screen showed the infirmary of Talankiao prison. Nash Chi was curled up in a corner, with fresh wounds on his face. The right screen displayed the special care ward of Shishan Sanatorium. Nori Cheng lay beneath the ventilator, her chest rising and falling faintly. I zoomed in on the prison footage. Nash Chi was carving letters into the wall with his fingernails, the blooded tips faintly spelling out Kami. I smirked coldly and switched to the sanatorium surveillance feed. The nurse was turning Nori Cheng over, her body as pale and limp as a puppet. On the nightstand lay today's Financial Daily, with my interview photo on the front page. Chairman Yu, the board meeting at 7. The secretary's intercom buzzed. I turned off the tablet. Delay it by half an hour. In the walk-in closet, I chose a dark red dress. It closely resembled the one I wore the night Nash Chi strangled me, but more expensive. When all board members had gathered, I deliberately arrived 10 minutes late. Let's begin. I took my seat at the head of the table. 12 men sat bolt upright like schoolboys. The proposal regarding the acquisition of Lin's Pharmaceuticals. The CEO nervously flipped through the documents. I interrupted him. Deal with this first. I threw the USB drive onto the table. The projector lights up, showing a video of Nash Chi confessing in court. It was me who planned the murder of Kami Yu. Nori Cheng was my accomplice. The board members turned pale. Chairman Yu, this. Watch it. I tapped the table. The video cut to Nash Chi's confession at the detention center. My father started manufacturing drugs at the chemical plant since 2000. After Nori Cheng's mother found out, a senior board member suddenly stood up. This is slander. I smiled. Uncle Lee, you were the vice president in charge of production back then, weren't you? His face turned ashen. I want to resign. Approved. I pressed the remote. But before you resign, take a look at this first. The screen switched to bank transaction records, showing regular monthly transfers from Switzerland into Director Lee's account. Is this the drug-dealing dividend? I asked, tilting my head. Old Lee slumped in his chair like a deflated ball. Now, I scanned the room. Does anyone have any objections to the acquisition deal? Unanimously approved. After the meeting, I asked the CFO to stay, compile all the evidence of Mr. Jin and Uncle Lee's crimes and send it to the prosecutor's office. His hands trembled so much he couldn't hold the folder. Chairman Yu, isn't this a bit too harsh? I finished for him. Compared to strangling one's wife to death, this is mercy. Late at night, I returned to Riverside Apartments. The fingerprint lock beeped, as if welcoming the executioner home. In the living room stood today's newly delivered auction item, a replica of Monet's water lilies, once Nori Cheng's favorite. I poured a glass of red wine and sat before the painting, sipping slowly. The phone suddenly rang. MSU, Miss Cheng's brainwaves are showing abnormal fluctuations. I set down my wine glass. I'll be right there. The corridor of Shishan Sanatorium stretched endlessly long. Nori Cheng's hospital room is at the end, with the window facing the direction of the Jin family ancestral home. What was her reaction? I asked the attending physician. He handed me the EEG. After seeing your news photo, her alpha waves showed intense fluctuations. I walked to the bedside, picked up the newspaper, and waved it in front of her eyes. The waves on the ECG monitor immediately became sharp. Nori Cheng. I leaned in and whispered in her ear. Nash Chi is dead. Her fingers suddenly twitched, and the foretube shook violently. The doctor rushed over to hold her down. This is too much stimulation. Get out, I ordered. After the hospital room door closed, I pulled open the drawer of the bedside table. Inside was Nori Cheng's diary, still sealed in a police evidence bag with its label intact. I tore off the seal and flipped to the last few pages. Mom, I've finally found the evidence. Director Jin not only killed you, but is also using the chemical plant to manufacture drugs. Getting close to Nash Chi was to uncover the truth. But why do I find it harder to distinguish between acting and genuine feelings? The child can't be kept. It carries the bloodline of the enemy. I closed the diary and looked at Nori Cheng. A tear lingered at the corner of her eye, refusing to fall. So you knew all along, I said softly. Then you're more pitiful than I am. I pressed the call button for the nurse. Give her a sedative. Before leaving, I whispered one last sentence in Nori Cheng's ear, live well. Just like the last words Nash Chi said to me before strangling me to death in my previous life. The next day was Nash Chi's funeral. I stood in the corner of the cemetery, dressed in all black and wearing sunglasses. The Jin family, young and old, cried their hearts out, but no one dared to look in my direction. As the priest recited the eulogy, my phone vibrated. Chairman Yu, there's news from Switzerland. I stepped aside to a quiet spot. Speak. Nash Chi has a safe deposit box at Zurich Bank. The password is your birthday. I hung up the phone and looked at Nash Chi's coffin. It was being slowly lowered into the grave, as if being swallowed by the earth. Goodbye, my dear, I whispered. Then turned and walked away. The private jet landed in Zurich amidst a light snowfall. The bank manager personally greeted me and led me into the underground vault. MS. This is what Mr. Jin deposited 5 years ago. Inside the safe was only a brown paper envelope. I sat in the VIP room and opened it. Inside was a paternity test report, the probability of a paternal relationship between Nash Chi and Jin XX, father, is 0.1%. I froze for a few seconds before suddenly bursting into laughter. So Nash Chi isn't even a descendant of the Jin family. No wonder old Jin pleaded guilty so readily. He'd rather go to prison than reveal this secret. There was also a photo inside the paper bag. A young Mrs. Jin stood at the entrance of the chemical plant, her belly slightly protruding, with a man in work clothes beside her. It wasn't Director Jin. On the back of the photo was written, "Never forget whose son you are." I burned the photo along with the report, and the ashes fell onto Lake Zurich. Quickly covered by snowflakes, on the flight back home, I had a dream. I dreamed of the moment in my past life when I was strangled to death. But this time, I saw tears in Nash Chi's eyes. When I woke up, the plane was descending. The lights of Pudong Airport pierced through the clouds like sharp swords. The driver told me that Director Lee was taken away by the Procuratorate this morning. And one more thing, he handed me an envelope. The warden asked me to pass this to you. Inside was Nash Chi's suicide note. Cammy, if you're reading this, it means I've lost after all. But you know what? I've known all along that it was you who saved me. That year when you were changing your bandages at the hospital, I saw everything from outside the door. I got close to Nori Cheng because she had leverage against my father, but falling in love with you, that was real. It's a pity that by the time I realized it, it was already too late, if there's a next life. The lower half of the letter was soaked in blood, the words blurred beyond recognition. I crumpled the letter and threw it out the car window. The paper ball scattered in the wind, like a flock of startled pigeons taking flight. Back at the company, I called an emergency board meeting, effective immediately. The Jin Group will be renamed Yuhe Group. No one objected. Second, establish a chemical accident victims foundation, with me personally serving as the chairman, unanimously approved. Third, I looked at everyone present. Confess any involvement in Laro Jin's drug trafficking, and I guarantee the safety of your families. The meeting room was dead silent. After the meeting, the secretary told me Nori Cheng had woken up, really awake. I put down my fountain pen. Yes, but in the garden of Shishan Sanatorium, Nori Cheng sat in a wheelchair, staring blankly at the sky. She can blink, but she can't speak, the doctor explained. We call it locked-in syndrome. I crouched in front of the wheelchair. Do you recognize me? Nori Cheng's eyes slowly turned, and a tear slid from her right eye. Tell her, I said to the nurse, that Nash Chi is not Director Jin's biological son. Nori Cheng's left eye suddenly widened, and a gurgling sound came from her throat. The heart monitor began beeping frantically. You mustn't upset her any further. The doctor rushed over. I stood up and left, the sound of overturned equipment echoing behind me. That night, I burned all the photos and diaries from my past life. The firelight illuminated the balcony, and the ashes were scattered by the night wind. I tried to squeeze out a tear, only to find my eyes as dry as a desert. Revenge doesn't bring liberation after all, it only turns you into another monster. The phone lit up. A call from the sanatorium. Miss Cheng has fallen into a coma again. Resuscitate at all costs. I said, I want her alive. Hanging up the phone, I opened the tablet. The prison footage froze on Nash Chi's empty cell. In the sanatorium feed, doctors were performing emergency defibrillation on Nori Cheng. I turned off the tablet and walked to the liquor cabinet to pour myself a glass of strong alcohol. The floor-to-ceiling window reflected my figure. Black dress, red lips, like an elegant executioner. I raised my glass and clinked it against the void. To revenge, drained in one gulp. The burning sensation of alcohol down the throat feels eerily similar to the suffocation of being strangled, except this time, I chose to suffocate myself.